What's going on, folks? Thanks for taking the time to hit that download button and check out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. If this is your first time checking out this podcast, a bit of background first before we jump into this week's guest. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with entrepreneurs and content creators and showcase the gadgets and gear that they use to run their business and create their content. When it comes to toys, though, we're a little bit more broad, discussing the toys that they currently collect, as well as some of the stuff that they enjoyed collecting as kids. A little bit of humor and a little bit of fun alongside business. This week's guest is a great mixture of both of those things, and he is Matt Cipoletti. He is one half of Big Kev's Geek Stuff and is one of the few podcasters who, alongside Big Kev, has taken their show from podcasting mediums to mainstream platforms, in this case, Sirius XM satellite radio. We talk about that journey as well as Matt's experience both as a podcaster and working for Sirius XM. We also discuss his latest venture, which is Twitch, where he has launched his Twitch channel and it's growing at a rapid rate. Not only is he playing games, but he's talking comic books and having great engagement and conversations with his audience. We dissect all of that and much more. So without any further ado, let's turn it over to Matt and learn more about the toys and tech of his trade. All right, my guest for this week's episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade is Matt Cipoletti. Matt is just one of those guys who's a veteran in the game, much like myself, between podcasting, satellite radio, and now his latest endeavor, streaming via Twitch. The guy's got it covered on all bases, and I'm really glad that he took time out of his schedule to sit down and chop it up with us. What's going on, Matt? How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. This is a long time coming. This chat. I mean, we've known each other for how many years now at this point? I don't even know if I could count them, but
almost 10. Almost 10, man. Going back to you guys having booth, you and Big Kev having booths at New York Comic Con for Big Kev's Geek Stuff.
Yep.
But you know, it's crazy because you've been doing this for a long time, just like I have. And, you know, I want to kind of start there with your work with Big Kev's Geek Stuff. And, you know, what got you into podcasting? Where, you know, how did you and Big Kev meet and jump into doing a show together?
So, the story behind Big Kev and I is we had just been friends for years, long before, Geek Stuff, you know, just through our local community. I went to college up here. Kev happened to be working at the college that I was at the time, and we just became friends. We had a couple of mutual friends right off the bat, and the two of us just had an interest in pursuing something other than just, you know, having a conversation Saturday mornings in the comic shop. And before Geek Stuff, we both had websites where we did, you know, toy reviews and movie reviews and all the same kind of stuff we're doing now.
Yep.
Or we, you know, on the podcast. He had his own site. I had my own site. And we were at Toy Fair together one year, covering it for two different outlets, but we were hanging out. And, you know, we stumbled upon this booth selling, you know, like mini mic kits for in-home broadcasting. And they gave us one. Like as a promo. There, we stopped by and we were talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah, this mic, you could just plug it right into your computer, blah, blah, you know, the whole spiel. You know how Toy Fair goes.
Yep.
And the two of us took it home. We were like, why don't we just sit down and try to record something? And that was almost 14 years ago.
Wow. And you were
evolved from there.
And you were being at that time when you started, how were you distributing the content back then? Because I remember when I started, it was right around the time when Apple first announced podcasts on iTunes.
I mean, that's what it was. We submitted our RSS feed to iTunes right away before Apple had a podcast category.
Wow.
They had just started accepting like talk format, user submitted RSS feed. And, I think they had maybe doing it for like a year at that point. And we had just built the RSS feed ourselves. We didn't use any sort of service to do it. I mean, it's all in a text file. And we just submitted it and started pushing it there right away.
That's tremendous, especially because you were doing it before services jumped in and planted their flag.
Yeah, there was no Libsyn or, nothing on a pod feed. None of those things existed. As a matter of fact, I remember there was a handful of podcast directories right around the time that we started. It was like, I don't know. It was like just podcast.net or podsomething.net. And there was some pickle one too.
Podcast Pickle. That's right.
Podcast Pickle, right? But Podcast Pickle was a lot of music stuff at the time too. It wasn't a lot of talk-based stuff.
That's right.
But once we got it into iTunes, I just sat at home and I submitted it any place that would accept an RSS feed. Is pretty much what it came down to.
And back then, you guys were just doing it for fun. There wasn't even a thing where you were looking to turn this into any sort of a franchise or a branding, right? It was just two guys turning on the microphone and sharing, waxing poetic about the stuff they love.
That's exactly right. It was nothing more than, let's just do it. We have these conversations anyway.
Yep.
And I don't know how it was. I don't know if you have a local comic shop that you used to frequent or frequented, but
many.
So our local shop here, right? Everybody would go early on a Saturday morning. You'd get there right when they'd open, and everybody would kind of bring breakfast and congregate. You talk about whatever, books, games, whatever. And it's, you go in there and you start talking, and it's almost like you're holding court.
100%.
Right? And we just took that conversation and put a mic in front of ourselves. I mean, and to be honest with you, that format has never really changed for us.
No, it definitely hasn't. I mean, you guys, the dynamic and just the genuine friendship that you guys have just carries over so well. And on top of that, there's no fanboy dynamic. It's just, I like what I like. I dislike what I dislike. And you guys always meet in the middle to give people just a really great amount of balanced content.
Yeah, well, Kev and I, as good of friends as we are, we often disagree on a lot of things.
Of course.
But just like any other relationship, in any facet, right, in any genre, political, geek, pop culture, news, whatever it is, if you can have an honest conversation and at the end of the conversation, as cliche as it sounds, maybe the end result is agree to disagree. But if at the end you had a good discourse, that's what counts, right?
100%.
Having that back and forth, having that toss around. And so, we've just never strayed from that. And it's never been about anything other than the conversation. We're not trying to sell anything necessarily. You know what I mean? Like it's our natural conversation. It's just what we would talk about if the mics weren't there.
Now, in terms of gear, you started, like you were saying, with the old mic kits. What gear are you guys using to do your shows now?
So not only do we have an old mic kit, but I remember there are photos floating around, not to throw you off a little bit.
Nope.
There are photos floating around where I have microphones that I drilled bases into pieces of plywood then C-clamped them to snack trays.
Wow.
That was our original setup for like the first year and a half.
That's pretty crazy.
But we just wanted to do it. Now everything is done. We do everything through GarageBand, because it's still probably one of the best, easiest bits of software to use, especially if you have a Mac.
Yep.
I use my old ass Alesis Multimix 8 mixer.
Man,
board.
one of my first mixers, man.
And I'll tell you why. Through the years, I've wanted to upgrade that mixer, right? The problem is that mixer is one of the last ones that you can find that feeds into most of the audio software that I've worked with, GarageBand, Audacity, and a couple other ones, that gives you true individual channels when it feeds into GarageBand.
Nice. True multi-track. That's a lost thing.
It's a lost thing. So I can control everything on the mixing board as we're recording, and then I can go back in GarageBand and poke at individual tracks if I have to.
Nice. And you're handling all the editing then in GarageBand?
Yeah, I mean, as little editing as we do now. When we first started off, there was a lot of editing. I think it was us trying to be
radio guys.
Trying to present like that perfectionist sort of thing. But at this point, Reg, I got to tell you, man, like we record our shows now Tuesday nights. By like 7:15, 7:30, we're done. By 8 o'clock, it's up online for patrons.
That's tremendous. Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask. The distribution model has evolved so much now. And, you mentioned patrons, which takes me into that aspect. A lot of people went into this and as I go into different podcast groups and different places, it's always, man, how do you make money off of this? How do you make money off of this? And I tell people when they go, oh, we're going to start, I'm like, listen, you're not going to make a dime. Not initially. Because if you're going in there with that mindset, you're destined to fail.
The number one joke we have when anybody asks us about how to start a podcast, the number one thing I tell people to this day is don't.
Wow, really?
And then I tell them that, and I say, look, I'm not trying to tell you not to pursue it if you want to, but I'm telling you don't pursue it if you don't have a real sense of what it is and what you're going to get out of it. Because just like you said, if you're doing it because you think you're going to be raking in the money, just don't. Find something else.
And the thing is, there's instances, lightning in a bottle. And I tell people this all the time. Like a lot of people want to talk about like Tim Ferriss. And it's like Tim Ferriss started a podcast, shot up to top 100 of iTunes, top 50, top 25, top 10. And I tell people, I'm like, listen, that guy launched a podcast after doing 2 books. I think he had done 4-Hour Work Week and 4-Hour Chef. He had an audience and it was totally on a whim. It wasn't like he woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to do a podcast about, entrepreneurship and it's going to take off. The guy had an audience. Same thing with Rogan. It's like Rogan took his stand-up career, his UFC fame, his Fear Factor fame, and then boom, he just blew up with the podcast. Same thing with Mark Maron. But
Kevin, is that the same thing?
Yep. Like these guys, they all have, I always tell people there's an asterisk next to that fame because they came in preloaded with other stuff. It's right. It's no different than, Barack Obama waking up and saying, I'm going to launch a podcast and it being number 1 on iTunes within the first week. Obviously, it's
right,
like.
Exactly. Yeah. You never want to tell someone not to pursue something that they're really passionate about. But what you do want to do is set their expectations to a reasonable level.
Absolutely.
Again, we've been doing Geek Stuff for, I guess, almost 14 years at this point. And, it's not our career.
Hell no. We punch the clock like everybody else.
I mean, it's self-sufficient, right? Like it doesn't cost any money out of pocket at this point.
Which is great.
It covers all of our expenses to run the show. It covers the cost of our booth at the end of the year at New York Comic Con, which is our biggest event of the year for like promotion and meetups and stuff like that. It leaves a little bit of money in the coffers for when a mic goes down and when you have a mixer problem or whatever it might be. You want to upgrade some gear, but we're not making. It's not a career. We do it because we like doing it. We do it because it's fun to do. I tell people that if I was doing this to make money, I would have stopped years ago.
Did you have any sort of formal training or schooling or any radio background when you guys originally started this?
Absolutely none.
Wow.
It was like I said, it was a lark. It was, I had, I knew how to write. I knew how to handle reviews and stuff like that because I had done book reviews for a magazine.
Really?
Years ago. And I did that gig just to get free books.
That's awesome, man. Learn something new.
Yeah. So there's a magazine I think it's still coming out, but it's called Renaissance Magazine, and it covers like all sorts of like medieval literature and like fantasy literature, and it covers like the Renaissance fairs and like the SCA and stuff like that. And I pitched them as like a freelance writer just to get some free books, and they just started giving me assignments, and I would get like, I don't know, 15 books a year or so to review. I'd get a little bit of coin for it. Nothing, enough to buy, enough to buy a couple beers. But so I had just taken the writing from that and parlayed it into writing about toys and movies. But no, I wasn't an actor. I was never a radio guy or a broadcasting guy. I didn't go to broadcasting school. I was a regular business major.
Wow. Hearing that is phenomenal, only because, you guys have such longevity and it's been a trial by fire. You guys have been learning along the way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's stuff that we're still learning, because like you said, it's an ever evolving, online media is an ever evolving medium. It's changing all the time. And so it's always trial by fire. It's always, can I use this new platform? Can I try this new software? So it's, but you just learn as you go. That's part of the fun, I think. Learning is part of the fun.
How were you tracking your listenership back then, if at all? How did you know that you were gaining steam or traction or anything?
So we were using, we were tracking individual downloads on the back end of our website, right? Because we could see how many times the file was actually downloaded. So you could see that number. That number was pretty easy to see. And then the RSS feed, that was always a bit of a science, because all you could see is how many times the RSS feed refreshed. So we would kind of look at the refresh rate on the day the new episodes came out. And you could never get a true sense of how many listeners you had, but you could get a feel for the fact that you at least had an audience. When you put out your first episode and you see it's got, 10 direct downloads and your RSS feed hits, 300 refreshes. And then by the time you're on your 300th episode, you've got 400 or so direct downloads and, 10,000 refreshes. You don't know the true number, but at least there was growth.
Right. Okay. Now, the thing that gets me is, you started doing direct outreach. In other words, doing the booth at New York Comic Con. What made you guys want to do that?
So you're from this area, right? You're
Yep.
from New York, New Jersey?
Yep.
Your whole life? Okay. So,
Yes, sir.
Back in the day, the old New York Comic Con, before it was owned by Reed.
Yep.
Right. Like the one that got shut down that one year because it exceeded the fire marshal code.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was online that day, standing outside
Oh,
out front,
geez.
waiting to get in when they shut me out.
Wow.
But so we had become real friendly with a couple of guys that were running New York Comic Con, through other small events that were taking place in New Jersey. Reed wasn't huge yet, and Big Kev was doing work with the Opie and Anthony show. That was right when that had started.
Wow.
And we kind of just parlayed our way into a booth. That first year of the Reed New York Comic Con, they had what they called the podcast area. And I want to say there was 3 podcasts. It was us, it was Comic Geek Speak, and it was the Secret Identity podcast, or I can't even remember the name of the third one, but it was 3 of us. And they gave us those tables for free that year.
Wow, that's insane.
Because they were looking to promote the show locally on that level, on the podcast level, because someone there at least had an idea that the podcast level was a real fandom. And while, Fox News and Entertainment Weekly and all those things are great, how many people they're reaching versus how many people they're actually bringing in isn't always a true number. But at least they knew from podcasters that they were hitting people that wanted to be there. So they had a couple of these booths. It was up on the 2nd or 3rd floor where the press area is now.
Right.
And they had this one little corner where I guess they couldn't sell any booze, and they just gave us a spot. And year after year, we just stayed with them. I want to say for the first 3 or 4 years that we were there, the booth was free. And it wasn't just for us. It was for a handful of us that had been doing it. The booth was free. It was just part of they had this podcast thing. And then what happens, and you know this because you've been part of this world as, almost as long as I have.
Yep.
Everybody caught on that all you needed to do was have a podcast to be somebody. And
Oh, yeah.
some guy would start his podcast 2 weeks before New York Comic Con, apply for a press pass, apply for a free booth. Someone at New York Comic Con didn't know what they were doing and would rubber stamp it. And then eventually they caught wind and it ruined it for everybody.
That's pretty much the downfall of a lot of press coverage. I think I covered New York Comic Con 12, 13, and 14. And then they changed the media requirements from 14 on, and I haven't covered it since. And people are like, oh, just buy the ticket and go. I'm like, nope, because I'm going to be inclined to work. And if you're good at something, don't do it for free. At least if I'm going to do it and I do it for content for my site, it's great. But I'm not going to get shoved around and be a human sardine can for 3 days just for myself and not even buy anything. Because sometimes it's that too, walking that show floor, it's exhausting. And but when you're done, you don't even want to carry anything out.
Oh, believe me, one of the best parts of us still doing New York Comic Con is that we have a booth.
Yep.
Because we have a place to stash our stuff. And our booth has ultimately become, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, our booth is just like, it's the Geek Stuff fan club. We invite all of our fans to come and hang out at the booth. You need a seat? Come and hang out at the booth. We got power in the booth. You want to charge your phone for half an hour? Come hang out at the booth. I've put fans to work for a half an hour in the booth. Hey, I got to run to the bathroom real quick. Just, keep an eye.
That's it. Keep an eye. Hand out some stickers, answer a question.
You know what? We've built a great community in that regard. And, I don't want to see that part of it ever go away. It's expensive now because we pay for the booth every year. But like I said, we've managed to, through things like Patreon, cover at least those costs. So at least it's not out of pocket. For a while, that was out of pocket for us when they started charging. And it was a matter of, could we recover that during the course of the con? Selling raffle tickets, working with artists, having exclusives, things like that.
Well, that was my next question. How, when you started formulating a strategy for having a booth at the con, was it something where you said, all right, we're going to do a live podcast, or we're going to interview creators, or we're going to have X at the booth? Like, how did you approach, running a brand, at the time when podcasting, being mainstream was in its infancy? How did you approach that?
So we had, there was no formula to it. Just like we've been talking, it was a lot of flying by the seat of our pants. I remember the very first time, one of the first times we had to pay for our booth, they stuck us down in Artist Alley.
I remember that.
Weirdest place for us to be. But at the same time, it was an absolute godsend because we rolled up with the computer, a couple of microphones, and we would walk Artist Alley in the morning before the floor opened up, and we would just stop by artists, ones we knew, ones we didn't know, hand them a postcard and say, look, if you get a free minute, 5 minutes of your time, we're 2 rows over. Just come by, sit down. You can plug whatever you want to plug. Just join us for a couple of minutes. And we had so many guys and women come by just to spend a couple of minutes with us. And I think they saw it as there was no pressure.
Yep.
There was no PR people. And it was free promotion, and they didn't have to do it in their booth. So it wasn't awkward for them to step away from customers. They kind of got to do it on their own time. And, it worked for us really well. And we've stuck with that sort of approach ever since. We still invite people back to the booth. Artists will come by. We've invited in recent years, artists to set up in the booth for an hour.
Nice.
Come set up in the booth, do some sketches, bring some prints, whatever you want to do. The booth is yours for an hour. And sometimes we ask for, a couple bucks here and there just to help offset costs. But I'll be honest with you, there have been some times where it's been like, look, I'm a fan of your work. If you hook us up with 2 prints, you can have 45 minutes.
That's tremendous.
And again, the biggest part about that, right? The most important part about that is that we've never come across as trying to fleece anybody.
Nope.
It's all just very honest. It's all just very down to earth. And even as long as we've been doing it, it's still grassroots, because I think that works for podcasting. I think grassroots, especially for smaller shows, not the big shows, but the smaller shows, because we're still a small show in the grand scheme of things, even as long as we've been doing it. But that grassroots approach, that real honest approach, that resonates with me.
100%. I think that when you guys started doing that, it's not only great, and this is what I always tell people, not only is it, you're bringing value to those artists because you're giving them another platform to promote their work. But on top of that, you're also providing value to your listeners because now you're getting all these different artists there and you're allowing them to interact with an audience that maybe didn't know who they were.
Absolutely. And that was always the goal. It was always a way to try to just bring everything in. I mean, you know, we got real big with the indie toy scene for a while too, and we still are. We're still friends with a lot of those people. But we were talking to all these great toy sculptors and all these guys pouring resin and making toys in their basement and selling them. You know, guys like the Suck Lord. I don't know if you know who he is, but guys like the Suck Lord, that guy was making toys in his basement, and then he, you know, a couple years later he was on Bravo, and his toys are selling for like $1,000 a piece.
Oh, geez.
But that's a guy who just came and hung out with us.
That's
come by the booth.
The
Bring
thing.
Some shit, if you could sell it, that's cool. I mean, that's what it was. And you know, and we turned on a whole bunch of people to that world that weren't familiar with that world, and we took a bunch of people from that world and brought them into, you know, some comic books and some art that they had never been familiar with, and we just tried to create this melting pot, and the melting pot was really just representative of our personal likes, our personal interests.
Where do they put you guys now?
Well, now because we pay, we have a little bit of say.
You got the dollar clout, like I like to say. Once the dollars are a factor, you get to have them. You make the rules a little bit.
So the last few years we've been in the small press area. Which I like that area because it's not Artist Alley. Not that I have anything against Artist Alley. Artist Alley is still my favorite area to be in, but the acoustics in Artist Alley are terrible.
Oh yeah, because they put them in that hangar.
So at least in small press, we can still like do interviews and stuff up there. It's pretty easy for people to find us. We're still surrounded by smaller independent creators. But we're close enough to like Marvel and DC where if we have friends that are over there, they can come to us if we want to. But so, yeah, I mean, we're paying now. So it's less of where are you going to put us. It's, well, this is how much we're paying. So what's available in this price range?
What's the biggest challenge for you doing, you know, podcast work now on location for something like that?
Honestly, it's traveling with the gear is the biggest challenge. Everything else is easy.
Nice.
I mean, you know, we can't stream. You can't stream in the Javits Center unless you're willing to pay like $500, I think it is, for like the dedicated internet service. $500 on top of the, you know, $1,500 you're paying for the booth and the $200 you're paying for electricity. But it's honestly, it's just traveling with gear because I bring in a full mixer, I bring in a full computer, all the mics, all the stands, because believe it or not, we've gone entire days just because we're busy where we don't record anything, right?
Wow.
We just don't get to it. However, I can't tell you how many people stop by the booth because they see the mic stands, and then we can set them up for like the next day or maybe later in the day or the next morning before the show floor opens. Walking around and you see prints and art and toys and bric-a-brac, and then you just see like 4 mic stands sitting on a table. It just stands out and it catches people's attention. So, you know, it's a pain in the ass to lug all that shit in, but it's great and it's worth it.
And now, you know, I want to get into your work with Big Kev's Geek Stuff. You ended up working a little bit with Erik, Nagel, Erik from O&A. How'd one lead into the other? Because that was pretty crazy. When I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, I know him.
So Kev was doing stuff for O&A back in the day, and they were looking to branch out the O&A channel when they were on XM. They were looking to branch out and bring in some independent shows. So they brought over Geek Stuff, and it was me and Big Kev working with them for, I don't know, maybe a year or two before they pulled the plug on most of those shows. I think Weird Medicine was the only one that sort of survived that first purge.
Oh, yeah, with Dr. Steve.
And so we went away for a little bit, but through all of that, I had just become really good friends with Erik. And when Erik was looking to launch a show, his own show, he was looking for co-hosts. He was looking for someone to sit in there and bounce off of him and he needed someone who was more in tune with pop culture than he was. He's in tune with pop culture, but not as deep as I am.
Right.
My geek runs deep. And he asked me, he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I'm launching a show. We're not going to be live at first. It's going to be pre-recorded. It's going to be an hour, maybe 2. Are you interested in doing it?" And how do you say no to that?
Seriously,
how do you say no? I mean, I got to go to the SiriusXM studios, once or twice a week. We would get guests live on the phone. We would get guests live in studio, and like big names. Like we were talking to a lot of media people and a lot of Hollywood people. And I brought a lot of people over too. I brought a lot of comic book people over and people from my realm. And honestly, we would still be doing that show on that platform. I think if Opie hadn't gotten sacked.
Yeah. I mean, that when you guys were doing that, I said, wow, that's crazy. And one of the reasons why I wanted to touch on that story is because, again, you came into this no radio background, and you guys went from doing that to having a show on satellite, reaching millions of people. You parlayed that into a secondary gig again on a mainstream platform while still doing the podcast. It's an amazing accomplishment, man. You definitely, if you don't pat yourself on the back, you damn well should.
I had to get
Really?
I had to get an agent because they had to present me. Sirius had to give me a contract because I was technically a freelance employee.
Wow.
And because I was talent, I wasn't hired as like an intern or I wasn't hired as a board app. I was hired as talent. I had to have someone to look over the contract.
That's wild.
And that was a surreal experience because that was something I never thought I would need. And but that was the conversation I had with the guy that I ended up with, who was a friend of a friend, so he didn't fleece me or anything, thank God. But he asked me, he's like, "Well, what's your background?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" "I'm a podcaster." He goes, "No, like what's your radio background?" And I'm like, "I have no radio background. I'm a podcaster." He goes, "How the fuck did you end up here?" And I said,
"That's tremendous.
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. They had luck. I was in the right place at the right time, and I guess I know how to carry a conversation, and that's about it."
It's so crazy like that. And then, being there during that time, especially during that transition, how did it feel like walking into SiriusXM and just saying, "Hey, we're doing mainstream geek conversations on satellite radio." Like how did that sink in for you?
It was an absolute dream come true. There's no way that I can describe that experience. Like I can't put it into words how intense and surreal that was to walk into a professional radio station, sit behind professional microphones, speaking of Hollywood stars on the phone or in studio with us, and thinking to myself that tomorrow morning I've got to get up and put on a safety vest and a hard hat and drive around in a pickup truck. And then and a week from now, I'm going to be back in here.
Yep.
It was amazing. And to think that I got to do it, even for the short time that I got to do it, was an absolute gift. And to talk about stuff that I genuinely love and have interest in that forum, it was an absolute gift. I will never ever look that. I will never ever. That's you can't turn that down, and you can't not be proud or excited to have had that experience.
Now, during the time that you were there, did you absorb any radio technique or anything to carry over into doing your show with Big Kev? Like, were there certain things that were different? Like, you walked in and you're like, "Oh, you can't bring that podcaster shit in here." You know what I mean? Like where were there any transitional issues for you?
You know what? Honestly, not really.
No, wow.
And only because, I'll tell you why. Only because by the time I had walked in there, the first time I did it, the first stint when it was Geek Stuff, there was a lot to learn because timing was very different. We had to take breaks. That was stuff that I was not used to. But by the time I got to go back with Erik, we had been doing Geek Stuff for so long, and I was just used to that. I was used to just talking at that point, and that's all Erik asked me to do.
Wow.
You know, I had to learn a couple of things. I had to learn the board a little bit over there, and working on that board versus my 8-channel mixer over here is, you know, that was a learning curve. But even still, you know, you have to learn a couple of slides and a couple of buttons, and it's not too terrible. But otherwise, Erik was like, you need to show up, you need to do some prep leading into the show, and you just need to carry a conversation. If you can do that, you're golden. And I was like, well, I'm doing prep anyway.
Yep.
And I'm essentially prepping the same thing. Now, I prepped it differently for Erik's show than I did for Geek Stuff. When I prepped it for Erik's show, I would take a full article and I would boil it down to 4 or 5 sentences that I thought would be good talking points for an audience that wasn't as deeply entrenched in our topics, as opposed to Geek Stuff, where I could go into the nitty gritty of something, you know? When we would talk to guys like Randy from NECA, when we had Randy from NECA on Geek Stuff, we would talk about, you know, points of articulation and dry brushing techniques and like shit like that translated into the final product. When we talked to Randy on Erik's show, it was about licensing.
Wow.
How did you get Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's historically one of the most difficult people to work with for likeness rights? How did you finally get him to give you your likeness rights? You know what I mean? Like, so you had to prep on a different level because you're talking to a different audience, but the technical side of it was still just talking into a microphone at the end of the day.
What did you use for prep? Just pen and paper and writing in notebook and keeping that, or what was your prep system like?
Yeah, it was pen and paper on printed out sheets. I would just print out stories and content, highlight it, and then write myself handwritten notes. And I would walk into the studio 10 minutes before Erik turned the microphones on, and I would hand out copies of my handwritten notes. And it was like, here you go. And Erik would do the same thing. He'd have a couple things prepped. And when our pal Giddles was with us, he would have a couple things prepped. And it was just, it was still, even at that level, there was still something very basic to it all.
That's insane and so phenomenal at the same time. Now, I wanna touch on, you know, just referencing O&A and the transition that those guys did now, you know, Opie to podcasting, Anthony to essentially having his own media empire. How do you look at that as a podcaster, and to see those guys that were such, you know, mainstream icons go and jump back into the pool that, you know, you kind of just sharpened your teeth in? How's that feel for you, just to see that?
It's frustrating.
Really?
It's a little bit frustrating. Yeah,
how so?
Because, you know why? Because I was an O&A fan when they were on WNEW.
As was I.
So long before they were the media empire that they were, right? So, you know,
yep.
They were just a couple of guys. When I first started listening to O&A, they were still playing music.
Yep.
So to see them go from that, right, to go to the biggest or the second biggest radio personalities in the country, and then to go from there to see one of them doing content out of his basement and the other one doing on-the-fly content in a deli in New Jersey somewhere, it's frustrating to me to have watched those guys have everything and then throw it away.
Well, the thing about it is, and I, when they both started going their route, the route that they went with their content, you know, Anthony, I remember when I saw his studio and stuff, and I was like, wow, this guy could run an entire show from his house without batting an eye. And then to see him just essentially turn on the mics and go, yep, we're going to do this. It's going to be a subscription model. Like, it's crazy, because it shows that as a content creator, once you get that 100, 200, 300 ride or die fans, that's all you need.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I mean, I give him much more credit than Opie, because at least I think Anthony puts a lot of work into, I mean, he's a complete lunatic, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but
no.
But he puts a lot of at least work into creating the content that he creates.
Yep.
And so I give him credit when it comes to work ethic. I just can't wrap my head around how they, you know, imploded.
No,
ended up where they are. That's the part that bothers me, to see that they had essentially what I would love to have,
mm-hmm.
and squander it
Well,
that's a
well, and it's interesting with Opie because, he planted his flag in podcasting, coming essentially, not to use the words our turf, but essentially that's what he did. He's like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to be on Westwood and we're off to the races. And I'm like, okay. And the content is so different, but I also feel that for a guy like him, which is something I love about podcasting, it was very freeing.
Oh, sure. He became his own boss,
right?
Which is one of the things. Look, that's one of the best things about podcasting, right?
Hell yeah.
You don't report back to anybody. There's no FCC. There's no, I mean, I guess if you say something controversial, you have to answer to the social, the social media demigods. But otherwise, it's, it's, you do what you want and you do it when you want it, essentially. I mean, you have to create some sort of schedule and you have fans that rely on content coming out regularly, but you do what you want. You're not answering to advertisers or sponsors, which is a bonus and a sadness at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, I don't know. It's a different world. And I guess maybe Opie can enjoy that now. I just hope that he regains a little bit of
the fire that got him there.
Because I don't want to knock the guy, but I've listened to some of his stuff and it doesn't grab me. It doesn't grab me like it once did.
Well, you know why that is? And it's funny because I was going to say the same thing. I think it's because he doesn't need to be as intense. You know what I mean? Like a character. It's like he's very relaxed. He's very mellow. He's like, oh, I'm going to turn on the microphones while I'm sitting on the beach fishing. Right. I think that's what it was. And I think that for those of us that grew up in that era, between cherry darts and the drum challenges and, all that insanity and the intensity. I mean, to this day, him stepping on the homeless guy's cake, I was like, man, you need to be a certain kind of person to pull that off and continue to mainstream in that capacity. Because think about it, as a content creator, one misstep sometimes and you can tank everything. And these guys did some stuff and they just kept chugging along. It was insane.
They were unstoppable.
Yep.
Unstoppable. I mean, until they were stoppable, but they were unstoppable. And like I said, I mean, at least kudos for figuring out a way to continue, I guess. But I just, to me, it's astounding. And, and I also see it as all the people they took down with them.
Yeah, that's the hardest part for me because I grew up liking so many different people, the late Steve Carlisi, all these guys. And I'm just like, man, it's just when the bomb went off, it really did level the entire city.
It did. I mean, it shook it up.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people who were personally affected by it all. And
the landscape just changed because, Jim went off and did his thing. Sam pretty much the rise of Sam out of that,
right.
To the point where, he's got a WWE gig. Like that was the crazy part, like the fallout and then the rise of all these other individuals.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like after the fallout, right? Whatever cockroaches survived managed to prosper and grow. I'm not calling anybody a cockroach.
No.
But I'm using the analogy.
Of course.
But you know what I mean? Like those guys all managed to hide from the debris and stay out of the turmoil, keep their noses clean, and find a home for themselves.
Well, I want to touch on something you mentioned about, the lack of not having to answer to advertisers and also patrons. And I want to talk about that because, you were talking about Patreon being a driving force for a lot of your expansion and things that you guys are doing as creatives. When did you guys decide to do that and how did you approach it? Because it's one of those things that as a creator, it's always tough because it's like we essentially give people free content. And It's like anything else. The minute you say to somebody, hey, a couple of bucks, you want money. And it's, a friend of mine put up a meme on Instagram not too long ago. He's like, you're not paying me for 30 years of work. You're paying me for 30 years of experience.
Right. So Patreon was a complete lark. Patreon was a complete lark. I had seen a couple of other content creators do it, podcasters do it. And I approached Kev about it. And I said, look, I want to try this. What do you think? And he said, well, I trust you. Figure it out. So the one thing I never wanted to do was I never wanted to take away giving the show for free.
Right.
Because, again, we have created a great community over the years, and I would feel dirty to start asking those people to give me even $1 when I've never asked for it before, outside of like, you have a drive or, you have like a donation drive or something like
right.
that. But we've never charged them for their weekly episodes. So to me, that was never going to change. So it really came down to what can we offer those people that they might be willing to toss in a few bucks. Now, our tiers are not backbreaking tiers. I mean, we have $1, $3, $5, and $10. It's nothing. There's no like $60 tier or $100, nothing like that. So it was really just about creating bonus content or additional content or an additional interactive element, right? So we pushed the show up 2 days from when we recorded it. We used to record it on Thursdays. We pushed it up to Tuesdays, and we released it to patrons 2 days early.
Nice.
For a couple bucks, right? And loyal fans were like, you know what? That's kind of cool. I'll jump into that for $2. So we did that. We opened up a Discord server that's only for patrons, and I'm in there all day, every day.
That's pretty awesome.
A bunch of our listeners, and we talk about movies and comics and toys. And, we have you know how Discord servers work. We have it broken down into different rooms and different sections. Yep. We have a room just for Marvel spoilers and a room for, like DC spoilers, and there's a toy room and there's a gaming room and just a bunch of people hang out there all day long. And then, and there's a general chat room. Hey, how's it going? How's your family? What are you guys doing this weekend? Oh, I tried this new thing. I tried that new thing. And it's just, it just further created that community for us. So we offered them that. We started, recording little bonus segments here and there, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. We would release those on a monthly or bi-weekly basis. We opened up the archives. So all the episodes that were no longer online, I started re-releasing to patrons in chronological order.
Wow.
So just little things, and then what we did was we essentially created almost like an audio commentary, like a director's commentary for the old episodes.
Oh, that's cool.
So we'd throw the old episodes online. We created a chat room for it in the Discord server. The episode would go online. I'd pop in there and I'd give my thoughts, having re-listened to it again. And then we'd have this whole conversation for a day or two with anybody hanging out in there about, what did we predict where we were wrong? What missteps that we had made, how do we make a fool of ourselves back then? What did we predict that was right? I remember recently we found one episode back in probably year 2 of the show. We were talking about, there's never going to be an Avengers movie. Could you imagine what kind of crazy person will create an Avengers movie? I mean, I think that was the words that came out of my mouth.
Oh man.
Right. And here we are, 10 years into the Marvel universe. So, but again, I think it came down to community. It came down to those kind of diehard long-term fans, just interacting on a different level that they hadn't done before. Oh, you know what else we did? I released the prep sheet before we record the show.
That's pretty cool.
To the listeners, and I give them a way to make comments on it or add stories to it if they want to. So they kind of have a sense of what we're going to be talking about that week. They can put a little bit of input into it. It fuels conversation. So it was really about how do I create some unique experiences without charging for the main show? Because I never want to charge for the main show. That doesn't seem right to me.
Nope. I think that's the best way to approach it. You're again going back to you're giving people value, but you're also respecting the fact that, they're the ones that got you where you are.
Absolutely. Those people have been listening for years. I mean, we have people that have been listening since, the first 10 episodes that still interact with us on a weekly basis. We're numbered episodes. We're at 534.
Wow.
But if you took all the episodes we ever released and bonus content, we're well over 600 episodes.
Man.
Of content. So, I mean, and there's been guys with us since the beginning. So, I have to respect those guys the same way they've respected me. They've given me their loyalty, and I'm going to give them back the same thing I've always tried to give them.
That philosophy, I think, is something that's going to carry you guys for 500 plus more episodes just because of the way that you respect your audience, but you also respect the content.
You have to. You have, again, that's part of being a podcaster, I think, is respecting the content, respecting the audience. Because at the end of the day, hopefully you're not just recording it to hear yourself speak. You're recording it in hopes that somebody else listens to it.
Hell yeah.
And you're recording it for them in a lot of ways.
I remember when I started in 06, I would just talk and put it out, and then I got burned out and I stopped. And then in 09, I remember I relaunched and I started using Blog Talk Radio because they had the switchboard for people to call in. And from there, it just changed the entire dynamic of how we did things. Because I had one of my guys like screen the calls because you could screen the calls through there. And then the best part was, since I was simulcasting, I wasn't using Blog Talk Radio's poor audio at the time. So, it was great. We were getting calls and it was just phenomenal. And to think, when this all started, nobody would have imagined like, hey, you can get live listeners and live calls. It's come so far, man.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love that. I love the ability to like interact on the spot, on the nose, in the heat of the moment. To me, that's one of the biggest things I miss about Sirius, is that element is missing.
Well, speaking of interaction, I did want to talk about your latest venture now. You're now streaming.
I am. I decided, because I don't do enough. I decided I was gonna tackle Twitch. And just a quick jump back to Patreon, right? I remember I woke up on a Tuesday morning and I said, I really think I want to launch Patreon this week. And by Thursday it was online. And by Thursday afternoon, we had our first 10 patrons. Twitch was the same way. I woke up like on a Monday morning and I was like, I'm going to figure out Twitch this week. And by like Tuesday or Wednesday, I had downloaded all the software. I had toyed around with some of the cameras and some of the setup that I already had. And by like Sunday afternoon, I think I had done my first stream.
That's phenomenal. And did you have a particular direction you wanted to go with streaming? Because everybody has like a theme or an approach. Some people want to do just old school games. Some people want to do just sports games.
I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do.
Wow. All right.
So I dove in with just very generic. What do I know about Twitch? Twitch is for gaming, right? And so I dove in with playing Spider-Man on the PS4 because I was able to stream directly to Twitch from my PS4 without any capture cards or extra equipment, stuff that I didn't have. I was able to do it real easy, right? And I loved it out of the gate. I only had a handful of people, 3 or 4 people that hung out in that very first Twitch stream that I did. But just being able to engage with them on the spot, I was like, nope, we're going to figure this out even better. And so I continued to do games, and I was like, all right, well, what else can I do? Because I don't want to do just games, because I'm never happy just doing
one thing.
I'm just not. And, in the last month now, I have branded out my Twitch stream where I have 4 unique streams that I do now. Monday nights, I stream a live D&D game, Dungeons and Dragons game that I run.
Wow.
Thursday nights, I host a fireside chat, which is almost podcast format, except that the conversation is 100% guided by the people in the stream.
That's awesome.
I'll have a couple of topics in mind in case we hit a lull that I know that I can fall back on. But for the most part, it's what do you guys want to talk about? And it could be anything. I mean, when I tell you, we have talked about travel, we have talked about food, we have talked about toys, comics, movies, we have talked about music, art, you name it, it has come up in conversation and we have talked about it.
Yeah, I think I was in one of the fireside chat ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think you were.
Yep.
So there's that. And then once a month now, I do a comic book club where it's just like, it's like Oprah's book club. Where you pick a book, you have a month to read it, and then we get together and we talk about it. So the very first one we did was Infinity War, because where we are with the cinematic universe, I thought it would be really interesting to go back and explore the comics root of all that and how much it was different. And so we did that. The second one was Green Arrow's The Longbow Hunters.
Nice.
And next month is Kraven's Last Hunt. And it's you have a month to pick up the trade or read it digitally, and we're just going to talk about it. We're just, we'll talk about the author, we'll talk about the artist, we'll talk about what influences they had on the book, what major turning points it had for the characters, what effect, if any, it had on comic books in general, on the companies that they were producing it for. It's like a book club, except
really dope.
It's comic books. And then I still do video game streams too, to pepper it up and to keep things moving. And I have found that I have unique audiences for each different show. But I have found the more that I do it, people start bleeding over from one audience into the other.
Yep.
People that were only in like the fireside chat are kind of popping in on the D&D feed just to see what's going on. They're popping into the game feeds, even though they don't play any games themselves. And, even when I run the video game feeds, I mean, we talk about the game, but we talk about whatever, whatever happens to come up while we're doing it. I mean, it could be, again, it could just be anything, but for me, it's just engaging with the audience.
I love that.
I just like that interaction.
I love that. And I like the fact that you dove in, blind, and you've been doing so well. And I want to get into, you said you started just streaming with the PS4. What's your setup like now? Because it's come a long way and you got a hell of a nice setup. I know you were using OBS.
Yep. So I'm still using Streamlabs OBS because it's really convenient and it's user friendly, and I've actually gotten quite good at using this.
Yep.
So that's my main software bundle. I have two Logitech webcams that I run, the 922 and the 920, because if you have two of the same webcam running into OBS, sometimes they conflict.
Right.
If you differentiate the model just enough. I've got some lighting in here now that I have picked up. My wife was a photographer, so she had all this lighting equipment, soft boxes and ring lights and stuff like that. So I've relit the whole room. I grabbed a capture card so that not only can I stream video games, but I can also, pull in like Discord feeds and all sorts of other things. I upgraded to a USB mic because I didn't want to feed off the mixer for that because it was pulling in too much stuff. I've got 3 monitors.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, I went out, but again, I felt like if I was going to do it,
you got to go all in.
I wanted to do it right. Like I didn't want to, unlike podcast when I first started, I didn't want to flounder for those first couple of weeks or months. Because I think the difference between then and now is back then you could flounder for a little bit.
Yep.
And do okay. I feel like now you can't flounder at all.
Hell no.
Because at the first sight of blood, they will hunt you down and maul you.
Yep.
Right? Like, so you have to try to come out of the gate as strong as you can. And, I said, look, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to put effort into doing this, I'm going to try to do it right. I got myself a Stream Deck, which is great.
I love that. I actually use mine oddly enough for my podcast.
Oh, I don't doubt it. With all the soundboards built in and all the things you can just pop on and pop off and whatnot, it's great.
Are you using an Elgato capture card or are you using
No. So the one thing that I will tell people about the Elgato capture card is it is a beautiful capture card. If you can afford it and you really want to get it, you can get it. But I've spoken to so many people now who pop into my stream who are like, hey, I'm digging what you're doing. I kind of want to get into this myself, but I can't afford the Elgato capture card. And I say, look, I don't have the Elgato capture card. I have it's an AverMedia, the Aver Capture HD.
Yep. It's
like $100 cheaper than the Elgato, and it does everything the same that the Elgato does.
Yeah,
it's plug and play. It's a good quality feed, and it's it's just not the brand name.
Oh yeah, it's crispy. Your feed, that's one thing I saw immediately. I'm like, wow, this is really nice. I remember when I was doing a video version of my podcast, I bought like a capture card that I could plug in like the HDMI of like my video camera, and I remember I paid like $300 for it. I'm like, all right, this is insane. But then when I started like kind of doing some streaming stuff, I ended up getting an Elgato. I had an external one, the old one, which I still have, to play old console games, because you can actually put in like a little dongle to plug in the red, white, and yellow or the other. So that works for that. And then I ended up putting an internal Elgato in my tower, which is what I use for everything else. And then it's just a matter of having some systems here in studio. So it's true, man. Like it becomes expensive if you want to go that route, but your approach is good because you did it piece by piece, and it really shows.
Yeah, and it's been fun to tackle it, and I got to tell you, all these are like a bunch of artists that I've known throughout the years all came out of the woodwork to start creating like logos and branding stuff for me.
That's great,
and it's amazing, and it's totally, I don't know, it's exciting. It's exciting to mess around in a new sandbox, and again, it's just. You get the urge every now and again. You just want to try to tackle something new. Almost, you just want to see if you can do it.
Well, the one thing I wanted to kind of touch on with that now is, you're what I like to call in the same demographic I am, geek parents now. How do you tackle that now with so many of these interests, and how do you translate either introducing them or explaining them to your child?
So my son is 7. He is no stranger to pop culture toys. But I will say I never forced anything on him. If he's taken an interest in it, we've played with it. But, I don't know, like he comes in my office and hangs out with me. He has some toys in here that he can play with. He really wanted to start streaming also.
Really?
And I was going to put him on Twitch, except it violates Twitch's terms of service.
Mm-hmm.
So I launched a YouTube channel with him, and, we've only recorded a handful of videos, and honestly, I don't expect anything out of that other than it's a fun bonding exercise.
Nice.
For us, right? We come in here, maybe he unboxes some stuff. We've played a couple board games on it.
That's cool.
Like a Lego build on it. But he's taken a genuine interest in the technical side of it. And what I keep saying to myself is, look, if the only thing he gets out of this is that he knows how to do some of the technical stuff, I think that's huge, because in 2019, by the time he's in college, if he has a leg up on some of this technology, if he grows with it and he continues to look at it, I think that puts him in a good spot if it's something that he ever wants to pursue, even if from a hobby standpoint. But he could if he was awake right now, he could walk into the office, he could turn on all the lights, he can activate the cameras and turn on the mic.
That's crazy.
And start recording in Streamlabs. He knows how to do it at 7 years old.
That's what I always tell people. Like, the days of, hey, the lemonade stand, or hey, selling Scholastic books, to raise money, or hey, selling candy bars. Like now kids are, between flipping toys, flipping sneakers, all this stuff, the streaming, it's a completely different ball game.
Oh yeah. And it started out because he watches all these Minecraft videos on YouTube.
That's how it starts.
And it's right. He watches all these Minecraft videos. And I remember one day me and the wife were looking up one of these channels that he watches, and I looked up the net value of this person, and it was like millions and millions of dollars. And I felt sick a little bit, like, what the fuck did I do wrong?
Yep.
Like I could have played Minecraft for 8 hours a day. What was wrong with me?
Yep.
But he watched all these Minecraft videos. He's like, Dad, I wanna make videos. And I'm like, well, do you want to play games? He's like, no, I don't think I want to play Minecraft, but I want to make videos. How can I make videos?
That's awesome.
Like, let's do it. Come in the office. Let's set it up. And it's fun. It's something we get to do together. We put it out there, and if it gets a little attention, it gets a little attention. But if it doesn't, he's learning a bunch of skills. He's comfortable talking into a microphone. He's comfortable with a little bit of technology. And I think all of those things will probably translate. Even if he never pursues anything like I do, even just the ability to talk comfortably into a microphone and look at a camera. I think all of that's going to be huge. I think all of that's a good thing. And, not to brag about my kid, but I'm a parent, so I'm allowed to a little bit.
Hell yeah.
But anything he puts his mind to, he tackles. He's done modeling work. He's excelled at jiu-jitsu. Like, he's like 5 months ahead of where he should be. Like, they keep upgrading him as far as like the program that he's in, because he just keeps outpacing.
He's a sponge.
Class. Yeah. So, and he excels at soccer. Like he's playing with a soccer group that's almost 2 years older than him.
Wow.
But again, he's got just a genuine devouring passion for anything that he has an interest in. And how do you not foster that?
Yep. You pour every ounce of energy in there.
Take it serious. Let's do it.
100%. Now, before we jump, we do a segment here, which is the hot seat series of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Before we jump into that, I did want to talk to you about, your work and your participation in the Ren Fair community.
Okay.
Because it's very unique, and it was, I wanted to touch on that because I've seen you go and, you share that experience with your son. And where did that interest come from? I know that you were saying you wrote for Renaissance magazine, but where did that come from? Because that's a very niche group to be a part of. And it's funny because I see more and more people doing it on a bigger scale.
Yes. I mean, I think it started with anything else. Like when I was a kid, my favorite Legos to play with were the medieval castle Legos.
Yep.
Right. So I just had a general interest in that sort of thing. And I had the opportunity to work at a couple of Renaissance fairs as like just a character performer.
Really?
Like I wasn't in any specific shows or anything. I would just walk around, interact with people. So I did that for a little bit just because it was fun. And honestly, the thing I like most about the Renaissance Fair and the community, first of all, the community is a pretty open, welcoming community. Much like a decent portion of, the geek community.
Yep.
You find all walks of life. Every race, creed, motto, every gender, norm, you find it all. And I love that. I love that it's all encompassing. And, I love the escapism of it.
Indeed.
I love just checking my brain at the door, dressing up like a pirate and acting like an idiot for a couple of hours and doing it with my son. Is just fun, but I was doing it long before I had him. I was doing it. My wife was doing it. A lot of my friends do it, and it's just an escape, man. Especially around here, you go up to the New York Renaissance Fair, you're outside all day, you're eating, you're drinking, and it's fun. And after having worked at a few, I worked at the Connecticut Renaissance Fair. I worked at 2 fairs in upstate New York. I worked at the New Jersey Renaissance Fair for a while. It's just fun. It's just something fun. It's just that's just a hobby. That's just an escapist hobby.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that because I said to myself, I'm seeing more, like a family member of one of my wife's friends, like they do it, and they actually had like a Renaissance Fair themed wedding, and
Nice.
I'm like, wow, like it's really like anything else, it's in my orbit now. And then I was like, oh man, Matt does that. I'm like, oh, I gotta ask him about that because it's such a unique thing. It's not like, the people that do cosplay where cosplay has now become like a mainstream thing.
Right.
So, I had to ask. And the thing about it is, growing up, I was big into like King Arthur stuff.
Sure.
So, I used to read as many of the King Arthur books as possible. So, like seeing that stuff was always really cool to me.
This summer, man, you got to get yourself up to the New York Fair.
Yeah, I'd check that out. That's pretty crazy. But you don't have to go in costume, right?
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay.
No, 90% of people don't go in costume, or what happens is they show up in jeans and a t-shirt, and by the end of the day, they're wearing a puffy shirt and carrying a sword.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
But it's fun. If you choose to get dressed up, it's fun. There are plenty of times where I still go up there in just, shorts and a t-shirt too.
Nice.
It's honestly, it's just seeing shows, seeing friends. I mean, I go sometimes, I don't see a single show because when you go to a fair, right, there's all sorts of like music shows and, stage shows. You see, magic shows and acrobats and jugglers. You see like, comedic shows and drama and Shakespeare. But I've gone up there and spent, 10 hours at the fair and not seen a single show.
Wow.
But just spent time with friends or family.
That's tremendous.
Walking around and, you find a shady corner and you sit down and you relax. it's just a nice, it could just be a nice experience. The thing about fair is, with me and my friends, when other people ask us, why do you go? My response, or our response, is, we go just to be.
Yep.
Like, that's it. There's no goal. I mean, if you want to see something, we'll go see it with you. I don't care. I've seen everything up there. You want to see, we'll go, but we go just to be. We go just to go, just to.
Plus, I like all the old school food when they do a lot of the Renaissance like style food, like pig roasts and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. The giant turkey legs.
Yeah, man. Like that stuff. I'm big into that stuff. I remember when I was younger, I did medieval times and I'm like, yep, this is fantastic. I could do this.
You would love the fair. You need to get yourself up there. It's a good time.
Hell yeah, man. Also, I'll include links for that also in the notes for this episode for anyone else that's interested.
Yeah, I think the New York Fair kicks off in August and runs through the end of September, so it's coming up.
Nice. All right. As I mentioned, the second part of our show is the hot seat, series of rapid fire questions right off the top. I want to start with an easy one. Why is Green Arrow one of your favorite superheroes?
Robin Hood.
Nice.
I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. It was an infatuation with Robin Hood growing up, Errol Flynn and Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And so visually I was drawn to him, and then I've just become an obsessed fan ever since.
Yeah, I think, with the Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, I remember seeing that as a kid, and then the Disney Robin Hood. It's interesting that they've never remastered or re-released that.
I don't want them to touch it.
Really?
No, I don't. No, I mean, they put out a nice clean version of it, I think on Blu-ray at one point.
Right.
But I don't want them to redo it. I want that one to just be, because I think it's perfect the way it is. I think the fact that it's still a little bit sort of grainy and choppy gives it, like, I don't know, it gives it a feel. It's got a, you know when someone tells you listening to something on vinyl?
Yeah.
It just has that feel. That's Robin Hood just has that. It almost feels like it's Sherwood Forest.
Nice.
I think it's perfect. Leave it be.
How do you feel about Arrow, the TV show?
Hate it now.
A lot of people have felt the same way.
At one point in time, I realized, you know what? This is not my Arrow, and it's okay if I don't like it. I don't have to feel guilty if I don't like it, and I just tapped out. And then I left everything else with it, too. All the CW shows, I just quit them all.
Really?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was the one that was kind of holding me in there.
Gotcha. I see.
I really liked The Flash, but even that was getting on me. Supergirl, I kind of watched because I felt like I should, because it was tied in.
Yep.
I liked Legends of Tomorrow, but that had a lot of misses.
Yes.
And I was just like, you know what? If Arrow's not holding me in, and that's the one that has to hold me in,
I'm just hitting
I
the
can
button.
dedicate my time to something else.
Gotcha. Okay. Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Favorite Marvel character?
Nightcrawler.
Really?
Yep. I have a Nightcrawler tattoo on my back.
Awesome.
I have a Nightcrawler figure and statue collection. It doesn't get shown as much as the Green Arrow collection, because I'm known for the Green Arrow collection.
Yeah, that collection is massive. Like, I've seen some stuff and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler to me has always been a very interesting character. He struggles with being good while looking like the devil.
Yep.
And the way he's been written throughout the years, from Dave Cockrum right up to recent history, he's just a really interesting, misrepresented character, and I love him for it.
That's all. This one, it's funny because whenever I ask people this question, with the recent Marvel and DC films, what's your favorite of each, and which do you dislike?
Wow. My favorite Marvel film, I'm gonna say Guardians 1.
Okay. Soundtrack, huh?
Yeah, and I find that's the one that I have watched the most.
Okay.
So for no other reason, I think I have to put that at the top of the list, although I like pretty much everything that Marvel has put out. If I had to pick a least favorite, Iron Man 3.
Damn, you're not you're in the majority for sure.
But even Iron Man 3 I like, and if it's on, I'm going to watch it.
Yep.
As far as DC, modern DC films, I haven't liked any of them. Oh, that's not true. No, that's not true. I haven't seen Aquaman yet. So I can't speak on Aquaman, but I did like Wonder Woman.
A lot of people share that sentiment, of liking Wonder Woman the most out of all of the films thus far.
Yeah. Well, it's the only one that actually felt like it was true to the character.
It's funny because when I watched Justice League and Superman got resurrected and he was fighting alongside them, I'm like, this is the Superman we need. Happy,
right.
very, very not aloof, but free spirited. Like, you know, like when they broke up the mother box, he's like, oh my, thank God. I feel like I'm dead. You know, it was funny because that's what I needed to see, but it was too late at that point.
It was too late. The damage had already been.
Favorite comic character that you'd like to see on screen?
Moon Knight.
Damn. You're the 5th person that has said they want to see Moon Knight on the big screen or on TV.
Moon Knight would have been a great addition to the Netflix series of shows.
100%.
If those shows would have continued. He's a completely bonkers character. But he's great. He's cool looking. He's got an interesting story. And he's not like played out. So it's his time to shine, so to speak. No pun intended.
Nice. Gotta throw a little tech in there. Obviously, I know you're a Mac user. Do you use an iPhone also?
No, actually, I am only a Mac user because of GarageBand. I am a PC and an Android guy for everything else.
Wow. So your streaming rig is all PC based, huh?
My streaming rig is all PC based.
That's pretty awesome. So since you're using Android, what are you using?
I'm using the the S9 right now because I haven't gotten the 10 yet.
Very cool. When you open up your phone, what's the first app you go to in the morning?
Probably Instagram.
Big IG, huh?
Yeah, probably. I don't know why. I think when I first wake up in the morning, I'm not ready for the vitriol that's over at Twitter. I have to have a cup of coffee before I can jump into Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter, YouTube comments, and Reddit. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, no,
nope.
I can't do those things first thing in the morning.
Nope.
So normally it's normally Instagram because I normally wake up to some sort of alert over there. It's either that or Discord would be the second one.
Nice. Favorite piece of tech besides your phone or computer?
Favorite piece of tech, my phone or computer, my PlayStation.
Nice.
Actually, you know what? I'd like to revise that. My Switch.
That's definitely been stepping up, man. The Switch has definitely been killing it lately.
Yeah, and I love it's just so fun. The Switch is a fun console.
Do you like having music in the background when you work?
I do. I need music in the background.
What do you usually listen to?
If I'm listening to music, it's normally a playlist on my phone. It's probably the Gorillaz or Green Day. If I'm listening to podcasts, I don't know. It could be anything. It could be Critical Role for right now because I'm binging Critical Role.
Gotcha. What's something that you've bought that's made your life easier or more enjoyable that costs less than $100?
Wow, that's a good question. Something I bought that's made my wow. I don't know the answer to that question.
Wow.
It's cost less than $100.
Yep, less than $100 makes you happy or
anything. It could be anything.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm in love right now with my Mezco 112 Spider-Man. I've been playing with that thing for 2 weeks straight.
You know, I got the blade at Toy Fair.
Nice.
And I said to myself, I was going to buy the regular blade. And then when they gave me that one, it was like icing on the cake. And I said, this is such a perfect figure. Like Mezco has really stepped it up.
Out of nowhere.
Yep. Out of nowhere, man. Their stuff is, not only is their stuff impeccably well done, but it retains its value.
Oh yeah. It's amazing. Right. If you wanted to flip any of those things, they all retain at least retail and most of them more.
Nice. Are you going to be buying more Mezco 112?
So because my collecting is so focused nowadays, if it's not Spider-Man or Green Arrow or I don't know if he'll ever do a Nightcrawler, but I'm sure that I will buy something, but I'm very focused on my collecting. So it's going to depend on what it is.
Gotcha. What was your favorite toy growing up?
Lego. I was a Lego kid.
Really?
I had thousands. I still have thousands of them in my house. Yeah, I was a Lego kid through and through. I used to like building my own stuff. Not even the kits. Just give me a box of Lego and let me have at it.
That's pretty awesome. What's your kid's favorite toy?
Slime.
Really? Do you guys make it yourselves?
Yeah, unfortunately. Everywhere. It's on the cat. Oh, it's everywhere.
That's why I was gonna ask. I was like, yep, if he's got to be making it himself.
I've never had to buy more borax in my entire life until the last year.
Oh man, that's insane. Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, who would it be? What would you eat? And what would you talk about?
Wow. You know what? If you had this is obviously, I think, a question where the answer would change 100 times as your life progresses.
Of course.
But but today, I would love to eat dinner with, I don't know, you probably won't know who this person is, but Brian W. Foster is his name.
Okay.
He is a guy who is associated with Geek and Sundry and the Critical Role people. He is honestly one of the most interesting interviewers I've ever heard. He did an interview with Logic like a month ago that was insane. It was so good. And he's done amazing interviews with all sorts of actors and creative people. And he's just super engaging, and you could tell he's just a natural conversationalist.
Right.
So I think that I think having a conversation with him would be really fun and really interesting. He also pours a mean drink. He's a mixologist also.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I would say probably something that pairs well. Probably like barbecue with some crazy ass cocktail that he made up.
Very cool.
And I would just want to know about his life, because this guy somehow he knows everybody, and I don't know how. Like how he links to so many different people in Hollywood and video games and pop culture in general. But he has so many ties to that world. I'm waiting for someone to interview him. So I would take that opportunity to pick his brain for a little bit.
That's awesome. Last segment I like to do what I like to call Reach One, Teach One, just to give the listener some value. And for you, my question is, if someone came up to you and said, hey, I want to get into podcasting or streaming, and I know that you had said that you tell people not to do it, but if they were adamantly going to go for it, what's one piece of actionable advice you'd give?
I think I would just tell them to not be afraid to screw up, to not necessarily be a perfectionist. I don't mean about quality. Like I said earlier, you have to kind of have a certain level of quality. You can't record in a bathroom stall, but just don't let fear be the thing that prevents you from getting in front of a microphone or getting in front of a camera. Just do it. If you're going to do it, just do it.
There you go. And to add on top of that, if you're a parent and your child wants to be a content creator, what do you got to tell them?
I mean, I give him my blessing 100%. And, I tell him to just be mindful and respectful of what he says, because, it could come back to haunt you one day.
There you go. And I think with that, you are off the hot seat, my friend.
Ah, excellent.
Matt, I really want to thank you for sharing the toys and tech of your trade. Where can people reach you and find you if they wanted to keep up with you or your content?
I'm very easy to find on social media. If you just go to GeekStuffOG, everything is there. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I don't use the Snapchat. That's for the kids. But yeah, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and of course the podcast, bkgeekstuff.com. But otherwise, GeekStuffOG across all of the social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the toys and tech of your trade.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, that wraps up our interview with Matt Cipoletti. We'll make sure to include links to Big Kev's Geek Stuff, as well as Matt's Twitch channel and all the social media accounts that you can follow Matt on. In addition, we're going to link to the toys and the gadgets that were discussed in this episode. Full disclosure, as always, they may contain affiliate links, which if you click to purchase, we will receive a small commission, which goes towards making a bigger and better RageWorks for you, the listener, reader, and viewer. Toys and Tech of the Trade is released bi-weekly. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and Spotify, either via Toys and Tech of the Trade, or you can punch in the RageWorks network and you can find the episodes there as well. If you're interested in being a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, you can email me, rich@rageworks.net, or fill out the contact form on the site. If you'd like to advertise on this or any of the other podcasts on the RageWorks network, you can fill out the advertiser form on the site, and we will be in touch. If you want to follow us on social media, links will be in the show notes for this episode. The best way to engage with us is probably Instagram and Facebook, which I pretty much am active on all the time. If you're on Facebook, you can become a fan on the Facebook fan page or join the RageWorks group to interact with myself and some of the other podcast hosts, as well as all of the other fans of Rageworks, whether it's our shows or our written content. All right, guys, thanks for taking the time to check out this episode. I hope that it brought you value, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.